Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. New year, new start, new stuff. Let's put this in the dumpster fire where it belongs for several reasons. Least of all is because it's just a tacky piece. Throw it into the volcano and say Jumanji. Let's get the fuck out of there, right? So, let's talk about, as we're looking forward in the new year, in, the spirit of moving on, because let's face it, recent history has been a total shit show, and the present shows no signs of getting much better. We look to the future, and I'm specifically want to look at the future of the trans discourse that's happening, because that's kind of important to me if you hadn't already worked that out. And there's just a few things that I've noticed, a few trends and a few topics that I think are worth mentioning. So as you should all know from my prior video about the subject, the UK court ruled against transgender and trans questioning children under the age of 16 years old being prescribed reversible puberty blockers whilst they figure out who they are and what they need. Instead, they are forced to go through a puberty that they do not want, can't deal with, and has irreversible effects. We need to keep talking about this. We need to push the discourse in the right direction. And we need to do as much as we actively can. Puberty blockers save a lot of trauma later on down the line for many trans youths. They are not the first step in a slippery slope down medical transition for everyone. Because I don't know if you've heard this, you might have come across this kind of weird slippery slope fallacy argument coming from a certain person, but let me tell you, that person, Kira Bell, is a liar, in case you hadn't heard that before. On a wider scale, gender confirmation treatments such as therapy, as well as hormones and surgeries, are currently blocked behind massive fucking gatekeeping still. The seemingly endless waiting lists that we have in this country and in, other countries as well, but this one is the one I have the most experience with, being a UK citizen. The NHS gender clinics are just failing at their jobs. They are just failing to uphold any standard of care for trans patients. Okay, so there is a law, there is a rule in the NHS guidelines that everyone has a right to NHS funded treatment in the span of 18 weeks, like starting at the point of referral. And all the NHS clinics have waiting lists longer than 3 years. And that's just for your initial assessment. You don't get hormones at that time. You don't get physical treatment. You just get seen. And then you still have to go through all the processes of everything as well. And there is also a thing called bridging hormones, which GPs are allowed to prescribe hormones whilst you're on the waiting list to be seen, which the fact that that's even a thing is ridiculous. You just should be seen. But also, not all GPs are doing that because they are inexperienced with trans patients, with hormones, with endocrinology in general, and it is just, the whole system is failing. So there is a pretty massive discrepancy between the time allocated for waiting and the time that people are actually waiting. And people like the aforementioned liar Keira Bell suing the system just because she was unhappy with the outcome, despite the fact that she knew the effects and she said she was satisfied with the results at the time. But unfortunately, the legal action has just encouraged the medical professionals to gatekeep even further, you know, because hell forbid someone else fucking sues them and their hands are tied by the new ruling of this court, and it's a big fucking mess. The NHS is supposed to provide finances and bridging hormones to finances for private treatments for people who are not seen in the 18-week window, and they don't. And we need to keep talking about it to make sure that action is eventually taken to do that, to make sure that that in fact does happen. But until it does happen, transitioners have to pay very substantial amounts of money for something that just enables them to live adequately in their own bodies, in their own minds. It is deliberately restrictive and it is deliberately prohibitive. I think the Tories just think, hey, you know, if they can't get any treatments, then there'll be less trans people to deal with. That's not how it works. The problem is that Conservatives believe that this kind of treatment is elective, and anyone who wants it should pay for it themselves instead of the money coming out of public funds. But no one elects to be trans. No one elects to require therapy and or medical transition in the form of hormones and surgeries just to function in their own body. Like, it's the same thing as someone with depression, okay? They might need antidepressants. Someone who is trans might need hormones to help regulate their mood so that they can function properly in themselves. And unfortunately, like, it's just not happening. And the reason for that is I'm willing to bet that this old kind of mindset that needs to really die off, that the same kind of conservatives who would agree to trans individuals paying for their own treatment is the same kind of people who would tell a depressed individual just to buck up and cheer up and toughen up. Because that's been proven to be helpful. Well, now that I've mentioned the dreaded C word, let's talk about conservatives, because they are an influence in the world, unfortunately, and we trans people tend to be their punching bags, which is great. So, currently, the Tory party that is in power in the UK is full of TERFs and TERF sympathisers. Liz Truss showed which side of the argument she is on earlier, like last year, back in May. I have a video talking all about that in the link in the description. Across the pond, the legitimacy of conservative right-wing commentators like Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens really got called into question, rightfully so, when they had a meltdown because they saw some pictures of Harry Styles wearing dresses in a Vogue photo shoot, and I have been desperate to talk about that for a while. Firstly, I've been gender bending for quite some time now, like a few decades. Where's my fucking Vogue photo shoot? Hello? I've got great bone structure here. Just going to waste. That's the real tragedy here. Secondly, he is just one guy playing dress up. Like, big fucking deal. This isn't feminizing all the men and transing all the childrens. It's not an insidious plot to change society, to transgenderize the population and everything. It just, no. No, he's just someone who was wearing clothes that look nice. No agenda, just the freedom of expression, which, hello, I thought these conservatives were supposed to be at least nominally in favour of, you know, freedom, liberty, all that sort of stuff, but of course they're conservatives, so not only are they hypocrites, they also would really like to return to the Dark Ages when stoning, hanging and burning witches was a thing. Which makes no sense from the IdPol standpoint of people like Ben Shapiro, who is Jewish, and Candace Owens, who is a woman of colour. Life was not great for you guys back then. Why? And of course, the other thing I want to mention is, of course, thirdly, other celebrities have been gender bending for even longer than I have. And guess what? Society hasn't fucking crumbled. At least not because of gender-bending celebrities. I mean, hello. I'm going to put on the screen a lot of examples right now of amazing people who do the whole gender-bending thing, or did during their careers, and inspired a lot of greatness. So, unfortunately, it seems nothing is going to slow the spread of TERF ideology across the UK or the US now, and of course further afield as well. Honestly, it might get to the point where I have to claim refugee status to some other more enlightened country, fleeing the horrors of Survivor TERF Island edition with just my makeup bag and my correct pronouns. And of course, I can't even begin to approach the topic of TERFs without calling upon everyone's love to hate favourite at the moment, J.K. Rowling. I can't even wear this t-shirt in public anymore. Why did she have to do me and the other trans fans of Harry Potter dirty like that? Like, all she had to do was one thing, just keep her mouth shut. She couldn't even do that. Like, no one would have known, no one would have been any the wiser. A few of us in the know who could see some of the dog whistles happening with liking the tweets of TERFs and everything that sort of happened before the big manifesto that, you know, we could see the signs there, but she went full mask off this year, and no one should have gone mask off this year. I can't even be too mad at her as an individual, because if you read her manifesto, flawed though it is, you can see that she actually does mean well. She just is interpreting facts really, really incorrectly and badly, with lots of negative consequences for people that she claims to stand up for, which, you know, it's all thanks to TERFy lies gone, like, spread like wildfire, like the wildfires in January of last year. Anyone remember that that was a thing? The point is that she sees herself, that JK sees herself as not transphobic, which, even after all of the balanced and measured responses to the things she said, and I'm not talking about the death threats, obviously those went way too far, and people are going to get, like, celebrities are going to get death threats anyway all the time. Like, that happens. It's very unfortunate, but it does happen. But you can sort of discount those because that's not part of a productive discourse. But even after she got constructive feedback, she's doubling down on it, and she's still calling herself not transphobic. And that is just not good. It's just not correct. If you've got a whole population of people telling you a thing, you might at least consider the possibility that they're right. I could talk about TERFs all day, but I really don't want to. And it's not that TERFs are transphobic. They are. It's not that TERFs are claiming the language of women's rights activism, which, again, they are. They are misusing that. It's really shitty to see. It's not that TERFs are gender critical, which is such a loaded term that it has lost all meaning, and it is basically just a dog whistle for transphobic. It's not that they rely on the most basic of biology that you can find outlined in the textbook of a 12-year-old's, but again, that is a problem. Like, you're supposed to be adults now. Like, fucking act like it and do more in-depth research, please, for the love of whichever deity. But my problem is that they are bullies. TERFs are bullies. Now, there are some really, really bad ones out there, but the worst offender by far, I believe, like, and this is just my opinion, is she's made it her business to be a professional TERF. So that, I think, really just nails the coffin there. Yep, that's definitely what you are. Her name is Posey Parker or Kelly J. Keane or whatever the fuck she's decided to call herself now. Because apparently when trans women change their name, that's like such a terrible thing and she can't accept it. But she's just done it. There's a word for people like that. I'm not going to spell it out. I think you, the audience, are clever enough and rational enough to understand which word I am, in fact, trying to hint at. Anyway, she actively campaigns against trans people. She uses the dog whistles, like terms such as adult human female. She's responsible for spreading that. It's a term that's designed to exclude trans women from the definition of women, and also hiding behind the flimsy defense of it's just a dictionary definition. Bitch, if you really were gender critical, as you say you are, then your research on a topic as complex as gender theory wouldn't end at the fucking dictionary. My thoughts are just stay away from her. She is poison. But at the same time, learn how to deflect these bogus arguments that she and other TERFs spread for two reasons. One is that, like, we trans folks, we shouldn't have to justify our existence to anyone, okay? We shouldn't have to justify our experience to anyone either. But if no one challenges this bullshit, then it will spread. Also, since transphobia is so linked with transmedicalism, the arguments against both require some of the same understandings of the topics. All right, then let's get down to this one. So, Brennan Beckwith has now finished their marvelous 3-piece video series on breaking their silence over being bullied off the internet by a certain YouTuber. I don't even need to say his name anymore. Who was using transmedicalist ideas diluted down as just dysphoria and using that as a cudgel to bully Brennan and other like gender non-conforming trans mask people for clickbait, for content, and that's really sick. Just because those people don't fit his idea of a cis-normative binary trans person. Like Brennan points out in their videos, transmedicalism reduces transness to a mental disorder. This is, a negative, desperate experience rather than just a normal, natural, and neutral deviation of gender norms, which it ought to be regarded as. And they also pointed out that transmedicalism is transphobia because it pits a group of trans people against another group of trans people. The medical model attempts to legitimize trans people, but unfortunately it invalidates anyone with a transgender non-conforming experience that doesn't include dysphoria, which even I at one point used to believe was the definition. I would never go so far as to bully someone off the internet in order to make that point. Jesus Christ. When I see, look, truth be told, when I first came across Calvin's videos, I thought he might have a point. Some people might be dressing up as or pretending to be trans just for attention. People do all sorts of things for attention, but the more I watched, the more, and it didn't take me long to realize this, the more I saw that Calvin is just a really angry person and is taking it out on other people, and that's not right, and that's why I do not follow Calvin, and I never have. Obviously, this is also, coming from something of an outsider perspective because I am not trans masculine. Brennan's full-blown honesty and integrity and intelligence to approaching this subject has definitely caused a noticeable shift in the discourse surrounding transmedicalism and transmedicalists. And it seems that finally the bubble is bursting on, the more transmed YouTubers such as Calvin and I can't even say her name. She who must not be named. Voldemort. People like them. They are bullies, just like the TERFs. But the thing I've noticed is that I do in fact see the discourse now moving in a more positive direction, led by people like Brennan, where gender diversity is not just accepted, but also welcomed and appreciated, and where non-binary and trans identities and expressions fall on a spectrum, and it's understood. And I love that that's happening, and I love that that's coming from young people, like younger like trans YouTubers. It's wonderful to see this shift in generation from when I was that age to now. I'm not that old. And honestly, in this part of my script, I was going to put the names of some of the like marvelous YouTubers that sort of fall into this category. But in part 3 of Brennan's video series, they already listed like almost all of the people that I was gonna put. So they beat me to it. But if you are interested in that, just watch that, like the end of part 3, and you'll see the list of people that I'm talking about. So, like with all large-scale societal and systemic changes, I believe that the attitudes towards trans people are going to shift from the ground up. And most people I encounter now have at least a baseline level understanding of what it means to be trans. Whereas in the 90s when I was growing up, I encountered a ton of ignorance, you know, from people that I interacted with daily. And obviously, you know, school and things like that, you can't help but interact with some people who are ignorant shitbags. But I'm not talking about just the willfully ignorant here. I'm not talking necessarily about the you know, hardcore bully types. I'm talking about like people who were unprejudiced but just didn't know anything. So like it still resulted in me having to like do a lot of explaining about my situation to people. And I was a lot of people's first experience with a trans person. And that's no longer the case, thanks to the wider spread of information and the wider spread of the discourse. And great, let's keep doing that, please. You know, more people, like random people that I've seen and have talked with, have understanding of using singular they pronouns now, which, you know, that would never have happened 20 years ago. And I will say this, that the majority of the everyday randos that I encounter either don't know or don't care that I am trans, and that is great. And, you know, people are so wrapped up in their own lives anyway, as long as you're no threat to that, you know, they don't care. Like, at work, I serve people food and drinks, and they like that, you know. Me being trans doesn't sort of come into the equation of that transaction there. Transaction. Ah, lol. But, you know, they can see me and other people like me just functioning in society, doing everyday lives, just happen to be trans, but it doesn't, you know, affect the way that I do my job. It doesn't affect them getting their drinks and their food and everything, you know, under normal circumstances. And the fact that you do sort of still have to prove yourself to not be a threat to anyone's safety, security, or, you know, like everyday life, that is still a problem. But it's happening a lot less. So that's also great. And anyone who does have a problem with me or other people just going around our normal daily lives, just gotta go to the shops, buy some bread, you know, do a job, serve some drinks, like, Anyone who does have a problem with that is not a good quality human being anyway. I hope that just as with a good, healthy, functioning economy, in regards to money, that these more liberated ideas will eventually trickle up to the upper echelons of those in power, specifically the power to make lives of trans people better. So that's what I see for the future of trans discourse, and let's just, keep talking about these things and making sure that they go in the right directions. Until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Non-binary is valid in 2021. God damn it. I said fuck in the first 30 seconds. Oops. Oh well. It's not like these things ever get fucking spread around anyway, but I'm gonna keep trying. I didn't really understand it. I just thought, fucking fly. When she changes the name, shut up! Fucking neighbours. Firstly, I've been gender bending for quite some time now. Where's my fucking vote? I did not mean to say that. Okay. Like, it is deliberately restrictive, and it is oh shit. Fucking thing is stuck. Fuck. Oh, bollocks. There we go. Like with all large-scale societal and systemic social change... Oh, fuck. I already used the word societal. Don't itch your nose.